This is her house. You understand that, Mom? That sentence, from the very mouth of the son I once carried in my arms, sliced through my heart like a cold blade. I stood in the room I had built with my own hands, where every brick still held the imprint of my husband's fingers, and yet now it echoed with someone else's commands. The smell of fresh paint, new curtains, the old photographs vanished, and I, suddenly a stranger inside the very home that once sheltered my life. I had been silent long enough, but when the dignity of a mother is trampled, when a sacred home is seized by ingratitude and ambition, I realized even silence has limits. This is not just a story about a house. This is the story of a woman rising to reclaim her pride, her love, and the very souls she once lost. Stay with me, because when a mother is pushed to the edge, she will make the whole world fall silent. I still remember that morning so vividly, the day Thomas and I left the little town in Idaho where we were born and raised. We had nothing but an old truck, a few boxes of belongings, and the naive belief that as long as we had each other, we could start over anywhere. The road to Montana stretched endlessly, dry golden fields on both sides burning like summer fire. But to me, everything looked bright, like a beginning. We stopped on a barren hillside where the wind carried the smell of wild grass and damp earth. Thomas said, "This will be our home, Helen." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but something in his eyes made me believe him. And so, from that day on, we began building a small world, with sweat, with love, and with calluses on our hands. Every plank of wood, every brick was placed during misty mornings and moonlit nights, shining through an unfinished window frame. I remember the scent of fresh pine, the smell of paint mixed with the aroma of the coffee he brewed each morning. We didn't have much, but we had something I only understand fully now. The belief that a home is not bought, it is built from the heart. Each room carried a story. The tiny kitchen where I learned to bake bread for him. The bedroom with the window facing the hill, where on winter mornings he would wrap a blanket around my shoulders and say, "This house will always protect you, even when I'm not here." I laughed then. Why would he say something so ominous? I didn't know those words would become a prophecy. Then one day, the accident happened. Thomas fell at the construction site, just a slip. The police said he died. That pale blue color, the one he chose, still clung to my clothes when they handed me the ring he had been wearing. After the funeral, the house became too big, too quiet. Every night I sat at the dining table, staring at his empty chair. I thought I would eventually get used to the silence, but the truth is, I never did. That house, every brick, every doorframe, still breathed him. I lived in it like a shadow, waiting to hear his footsteps in the hallway, waiting for the door to open and his voice to say, "I'm home, Helen." The town slowly forgot Thomas's name, but I didn't. I kept everything the same, the photographs, his gardening tools, the boots he always left by the door. People said I was crazy, that I should sell the house and move away, but I couldn't. This house was our flesh and blood, our youth carved into wood and stone. Maybe that's why I never imagined that someday my own son, the child I gave birth to and raised in this very home, would be the one to force me out of it. But everything begins here, with the house I built with my own hands, with the love I once believed would last forever. I had no idea that the walls built from bricks and faith would one day become a cage holding memories and tears. And it is here, in the very place that once symbolized love, that pain, betrayal, and an unthinkable reckoning would unfold. Because sometimes what is built with love can be destroyed by the very people we love the most. After Thomas died, I thought time would soothe me. But some wounds never heal. They simply change shape, shifting from tears to silence, from pain to routine. I still lived in that house, the home we built together, now inhabited only by me and echoes. Each morning I made coffee for two, though only one cup would be touched. Each night I set the table with 2 sets of cutlery, 2 glasses of water, and the empty chair across from me, the place where Thomas once sat. I could never fold it away. Maybe a part of me believed that if I kept everything exactly as it was, he would come back, walk through the door, and smile at me the way he always did. When night fell, the house turned unbearably cold. Wind hissed through the cracks, the wood creaked as if footsteps moved across the floor. Some nights, I heard a faint sigh from the living room, where that chair rested in the dark. I wasn't afraid. I simply smiled, placed my hand over my heart, and whispered, "I know you're still here." People in town told me I should sell the house, that a woman shouldn't live alone with her past. But they didn't understand. This house was the only piece left of my life with Thomas. If I left, I would have nothing. I kept everything untouched. The wedding photo, the leather gloves he used in the garden, the coat hanging behind the door. I even washed the cup he used and set it neatly on the shelf, as if he might return tomorrow for his morning coffee. Some afternoons, I sat on the porch watching sunlight fall across the wooden steps. My shadow stretched long and lonely, fading as evening settled. I thought, if his spirit still wandered somewhere, he wouldn't want me to cry. But how could I stop when everything around me reminded me of him? Then winter came, cold and merciless. Snow covered the little house like a blanket of white. I lit the fireplace, sat in front of the empty chair, and told him small stories. About the deer that visited the garden, about the neighbor's children starting school again. I spoke, and I imagined that he still listened. 1 year, then 2. The house remained standing, but my heart slowly cracked. People say time heals, but truly, it only teaches us how to live with pain. I didn't know what I was living for anymore, until the day I received the first letter from my son, Daniel. "Mom, I'm coming home. I want you to meet Lauren, my wife. I missed that house." I cried reading those words. A tear dropped onto the paper, smudging the word home. For the first time in years, I felt my heart beat strongly again. My son, he was coming back. The house would have laughter again, warmth again, life again. I believed that was what Thomas would have wanted, for this place to breathe once more. I started cleaning everything. I wiped every window frame, dusted the tables, even picked a few dried lavender stems to place on the dining table. I left the empty chair for Thomas and prepared 2 more chairs for Daniel and his wife. I never imagined that on the very evening Daniel returned, the moment the first lights flickered on in the house that had been silent for so long, I would feel Thomas's spirit begin to drift away. Because from that moment on, the house no longer belonged only to me. Lauren, the daughter-in-law I had never met, stepped across the threshold with a sweet smile and cold eyes. She looked around, examining, calculating, and when she placed her hand on Thomas's empty chair, gently tracing the scratched wooden edge, a shiver ran down my spine. I didn't know why, but in that instant I sensed it. A storm was coming. I had no idea that this young woman would slowly turn my home, the place built from love, into a battlefield of power, deceit, and betrayal. And I, someone who had lived with the past, would have to learn how to fight for the present. But that is the story of another night. For now, with the fire flickering weakly in the hearth, I sat there, facing that empty chair, whispering softly, "Thomas, if you can hear me, help me be strong, because I think I'm about to defend this house, not from loneliness anymore, but from my own flesh and blood." The night before Daniel returned, I could hardly sleep. The wind through the lavender bed sounded like Thomas's whispers, gentle, low, mournful. I made the coffee ahead of time, laid an extra blanket on my son's bed, and sat watching the moonlight glint on the window. Part of me still trembled. I was afraid he had changed, afraid that this house, which had once been his whole world, was now only a faint memory. When the car stopped in the driveway, my heart raced like in the old days when Daniel was a child running in shouting, "Mom, I'm home!" But this time the footsteps that came through the door were heavier, slower. The door opened, and before me stood a man grown, tall, with a weariness in his eyes, but still my son. I wrapped my arms around him. That warm feeling softened my heart. I whispered, "Welcome home." Right behind him was Lauren, the girl I'd only known from a few photographs. Her smile was polite, light, but her eyes were cold. Not the cold of a stranger, but of someone who was watching, measuring, calculating. As she stepped in, her gaze swept the room, lingered on the wedding portrait of Thomas and me, then rested on the empty chair. She said nothing, only tilted her head. That look made me shiver. "This house, it's so old," she said, a half smile on her lips. Daniel laughed and replied, "It has soul, Lauren. Mom's kept it just like when I was little." She only nodded and didn't answer. I tried not to show it. I told myself maybe she wasn't used to this place, the small-town air, the old wood, the smell of dried lavender. I prepared dinner. The table was set for 4, but Thomas's chair remained empty, as always. I placed the plates and quietly averted my eyes when I saw Lauren look at that chair. A small frown, perhaps finding it odd. I knew she didn't understand. During dinner, Daniel talked about work in Denver, projects, pressure, and exhaustion. Lauren interjected now and then about modern life, about change to adapt. I smiled, serving more food, trying to keep the mood warm. But the room grew colder, not from the wind, but from the invisible distance widening between us. That night, when they went to bed, I stayed in the living room, watching the weak flames in the fireplace. The house that had once been so warm now felt heavy. I heard a small laugh from the room upstairs, Lauren's laugh. It sounded like breaking glass, clear but jarring. I told myself I was being suspicious. My son was happy, that was enough. Yet deep inside, a vague voice murmured, a bad premonition. The next morning I found Lauren standing by the window, looking out to the garden. She asked, "Mrs. Helen, did you plant all these lavender yourself?" I nodded, smiling. "Yes, Thomas and I planted them. It was his favorite." She tipped her head, eyes distant. "It's a little old-fashioned." I was thinking, if there were a small pool there, it might look nicer. The words landed light, but cut deep. I only answered softly, "Not everything old is meaningless, Lauren." She smiled and turned away. In the days that followed, Lauren began to touch everything. She changed the curtains, swapped rugs, moved furniture under the pretext of refreshing the space. I tried to endure. Daniel looked at me with half awkwardness, half avoidance. I knew he wanted peace, but the house, the place where I used to hear my husband's laughter, where I'd rocked my child to sleep, was slowly becoming alien. One evening, I overheard Lauren speaking on the phone in a low voice. "This house has a lot of potential. If we renovate, the price will easily double. I'll convince Daniel soon." I stood silent behind the door, feeling as if someone squeezed my chest. So her gaze had never been curiosity. It had been appraisal. That night I sat at the table again, facing Thomas's empty chair. Candlelight flickered, throwing the chair's shadow on the wall, making it look as if someone sat there. I whispered, "You see, they want to change everything. This whole house and me." The wind slipped through a crack. The candle flickered. For a moment I heard a little creak, like someone leaning back into the chair. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall. I don't know if it was Thomas's spirit comforting me or a warning. But that night I understood one thing.
My love for this house is not merely memory. It is the last border of my dignity. And if anyone dares cross that boundary, I will make them pay. I do not yet know who that will be, but I know the story is not over. Because when a mother is driven out of the place she built with blood and tears, she will not fall. She will fight. And Lauren has only just stepped into this house. She does not yet know that this home remembers everything, and it does not forgive easily.
After that dinner, I sat silently, watching Daniel and Lauren walk up the stairs, their hands clasped tightly, just like Thomas and me long ago. Except in my daughter-in-law's eyes, I saw something else, something cold, calculating. Not the gaze of someone seeking a home, but the gaze of someone assessing the value of a house. From that day, the atmosphere began to shift, slowly, subtly, but I felt every beat of it. Lauren began fixing things. She said she only wanted to make the house brighter, more modern, but to me, it was her way of scrubbing away the traces of Thomas, of me, of the years that built this place. She replaced the hand-embroidered curtains I had spent 3 winters completing. Those white curtains, smelling faintly of soap, were swapped for thick fabric, gray and cold like dawn fog. The living room, where I once sat sewing Lauren's wedding dress before her ceremony, was repainted in ash. Lauren called it neutral and sophisticated. To me, it was the color of ashes, of memories burned down to nothing. Day by day, things disappeared. The wedding photo of Thomas and me, gone from the shelf. The grandfather clock Daniel's grandfather left behind, pushed down to the basement because it's too loud. Even the smell of pine wood Thomas loved was overtaken by the industrial air freshener Lauren brought from the city. Daniel didn't seem to notice. My son, the one who once insisted, "This house is Mom's," now only smiled weakly. "Lauren just wants to help you, Mom," he said, before walking away, leaving me standing in the unfamiliar living room, feeling as though someone had stolen the soul from my body. I began waking in the middle of the night, quietly walking down the hallway, touching the walls, trying to feel the warmth of the past. But everything was cold. The house that once echoed with laughter now held only the sound of Lauren's footsteps, the clink of cups meeting the table, the uneven rhythm of doors opening and closing. One morning, I heard hammering. Lauren said, "Your old room should be remodeled into my office." She spoke with the ease of someone stating a fact, as if I no longer had any right over my own home. Daniel stayed silent, his eyes lowered, unable to meet mine. And in that moment, I understood. Lauren wasn't just changing curtains or repainting walls. She was erasing me from my own life. I didn't protest. I watched. I observed. Thomas had taught me that what truly matters doesn't need shouting. You only wait for the right moment. But deep inside, a quiet fire burned. The fire of a mother being pushed out of the home she built. Each time Lauren removed something, I memorized its original place, storing the house's soul inside my mind. At night, when they slept, I would place one small object, a photo frame, a notebook, an old cup, back where it used to belong. Not to rebel, but to remind the house, I am still here. Then one night, I heard a whisper. Not from Lauren, not from Daniel, but from the corner where Thomas once hung his woodworking jacket. Wind slipped through the crack of the door, making a sound like a voice from beyond. "Helen, don't let them take everything." I sat up straight, looking around, heart pounding. No one was there, but I knew Thomas was still here, in every brick, in every breath of this house. And in that moment, I understood. If Lauren wanted to claim this place as her home, she would have to face the one who built it. And that person is me. The house now held 2 souls, one of the past, one of the present. And between those two worlds, I, the wife, the mother, the true owner, began quietly planning how to reclaim what belongs to me. Not with violence, not with shouting, but with the one thing Lauren could never understand: memory. I knew the war had only just begun. Since the days Lauren began renovating the house, I felt as if I were living inside a quiet rain. No thunder, no lightning, but damp and cold down to the bone. Everything familiar was disappearing, little by little. But I still had one place left to breathe, a peaceful corner untouched by her hands. The garden behind the house. It was where Thomas and I planted our first lavender in our first summer in Montana. We chose that plant for its gentle scent, for its purple stretching across the ground like the evening sky. To me, that garden was not just soil and flowers. It was a piece of our marriage's soul. Every patch was tilled by Thomas's hands, every seed placed down by my heart full of hope. After Thomas died, the garden became the place where I spoke to him every day. Each morning, I sat by the flower beds and poured 2 cups of tea, one for me, one for him. Each night, I placed a few lavender sprigs on the dinner table, where the empty chairs still waited. I had once believed that as long as the garden remained, the house was still mine. I was wrong. One morning, I heard engines rumbling. The roar from behind the house tightened my chest. When I stepped outside, 2 strange men were uprooting the lavender, tossing the purple bundles into a truck. Lauren stood in the middle of the garden holding a design plan. She turned to me, smiling gently. "Mom, I'm planning to put in a small pool for the kids in the future, and so Daniel has a place to relax. This spot gets great sunlight. It's perfect." I couldn't say a word. I just watched the petals fall, purple wings stained with mud, crushed without mercy. The scent of lavender mixed with the smell of gasoline, wet soil, metal, a harsh and icy mixture. I stood there, frozen. Daniel walked out from the house, eyes uneasy. I thought he would say something, stop them, but no, he only sighed and said, "Mom, times have changed. People don't keep flower gardens like before. Lauren just wants to make the house newer." The house. Those 2 words cut through me like a blade. Yes, it was my house, the house Thomas and I built. But now everyone called it Lauren and Daniel's house. I felt myself slowly being erased, not just from the home, but from my own life. That evening I went to the garden. The soil still carried footprints. A few lavender stalks lay crushed under the mud. I knelt down, picked them up one by one, gently cleaned them, and laid them near the porch. The scent was faint, but enough for me to feel Thomas nearby. I heard the wind slipping through the roof, rustling like his whisper. "Helen, don't let them take everything." I began saving a few seeds, lavender seeds, tiny as dust, but I believed they held a kind of strength, the strength of memory. I wrapped them in an old cloth and hid them in the wooden compartment under the stairs, a place Lauren would never touch. In the days that followed, I became quieter. Lauren thought I had accepted everything. She laughed, chatted, showed off the pool design, talked about summer parties and friends from Denver. Daniel was busy, unaware. But inside me, something was changing. I was no longer the weak mother pushed aside. I began calculating, not to take revenge with blood, but with memory, with the one thing Lauren could never understand, never buy. That night, I went back to the garden again. Moonlight washed over the empty soil where the flower bed used to be. I dug a small hole, dropped in the remaining lavender seeds, and whispered, "Grow, before they forget this place once lived. once loved. From afar, I saw Lauren standing at the second-floor window, the light behind her making her face a blur. She watched me, lips pressed tight, as if suspecting something. But I wasn't afraid, because now I knew I still had something she never would: the soul of this house. I didn't know when the lavender would sprout again.
Maybe weeks, maybe months, but I believed when the scent once more drifted across the porch, Lauren would understand. Some things, no matter how much she repaints, replaces, or pours concrete over, can never be erased. The garden might be dug up, but its memory was blooming inside me, and I, once silent and enduring, was preparing for a new season, a season where I would not only replant lavender, but sow the seeds of taking back what is rightfully mine. Ever since the garden was torn out and replaced with a swimming pool, I haven't heard real laughter in this house anymore. The sound of running water, music from outdoor speakers, the chatter of Lauren and her young, lively friends. All of it felt like knives slicing through the space that once belonged to me and Thomas. I lived among those sounds, yet no one heard my voice anymore. Time passed, and the house kept changing under Lauren's hands. New curtains, new floors, foreign perfumes clinging to every corner. But no matter how hard she tried, whenever the wind brushed through the porch, I could still smell the old wood. That scent was a reminder that something of mine still resisted them, quietly but steadfastly. Daniel barely spoke to me these days. My son, the one who once sat and listened to me tell stories about every brick his father laid, was now absorbed in his phone, his work, and the parties Lauren hosted. I once believed that patience and love would be enough for him to see the truth, but I had been wrong. One weekend, Lauren said she was inviting friends from Denver. I looked at the new crystal glasses on the table, expensive things she proudly claimed she bought with the family's shared savings. I quietly said, "Lauren, this is not a place for parties. Daniel's father built this house with his hands, not so it could be filled with loud music and drunk voices." She laughed, that cold, frosty kind of laugh. "Mother, you should relax a bit. Times have changed. A house is for living, not worshiping the past." Her words were like a stone hurled straight into my heart. I turned to Daniel, waiting. Just one sentence: "Lauren, don't talk to my mother like that." But he only bowed his head and sighed. That night, music blasted through the walls. I sat in my room, listening to laughter echo around the house. Every time glasses clinked together, I remembered the sound of Thomas hammering stakes, the soft chuckle he made when he placed the final brick on the porch. Those two sounds now twisted together in my chest, forming a distorted symphony of grief. Near midnight, I stepped into the living room, lights flickering, spilled wine on the table. Lauren was laughing loudly, her bright red dress glowing in the mirror. My voice trembled with anger as I said softly, "Enough, Lauren. This is not a bar, this is my house." The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward me as if I had spoken madness. Lauren glanced at Daniel, half smile, half challenge. And then Daniel, my son, raised with every penny I scraped together, shouted, "This is her house, Mom! Don't you understand?" In that instant, I felt everything break. Every brick, every wall, every memory. Those words, sharp as a blade, sliced through the last fragile piece of trust I had for him. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply stood there, frozen, staring into my son's eyes, the eyes that once carried Thomas's warmth, now cold and unfamiliar. Lauren rested her hand on Daniel's shoulder, signaling the guest to continue. The music resumed, but I no longer heard it. All I saw was Thomas standing at the doorway in my mind, looking at me with the same sorrow he had when we buried our old dog behind the garden. I knew this:
If he were still alive, he would never have allowed me to suffer this humiliation in my own home. I turned away and walked back to my room. Each step felt like I was stomping on my own heart. In the mirror, I saw my pale face, a woman erased from her own son's memory. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the bed, moonlight pouring through the window, touching the empty chair where Thomas used to sit and read the newspaper. I remembered the old days, when Daniel was still a child, when we planted the first lavender together. I whispered, "Thomas, they've taken everything from us, but maybe they don't know I still have one thing left." A faint smile touched my lips, not out of joy, but because I finally understood. Love, kindness, and patience. Sometimes those are the very things that make others think you're weak. And I knew that from the moment Daniel said those words. Every illusion I had died. But from that wreckage, something else was born. The will to reclaim what was lost. I opened the drawer and took out the small cloth wrapped around the lavender seeds I had hidden days earlier. I held it in my hand and breathed in the lingering scent. Then I smiled. They think they have erased me, but they don't know that in these tiny seeds, I have buried my soul. That night, I planted the lavender seeds behind the house, under the silver moonlight. I whispered my final promise to Thomas. Rest now. Leave the rest to me. And in the wind, I felt his answer, soft as breath. Helen, don't be afraid. Sometimes, the most beautiful revenge is letting them realize what they've lost. I lifted my head. Moonlight covered the empty garden like a shroud. But I knew, under the cold soil, the lavender was preparing to rise, just like me. I was no longer the gentle mother. I had become the keeper of this house's memory. After the night Daniel shouted those words that froze me inside my own home, I knew one thing clearly. Hurtful words were only the beginning. They were the spark for a storm I could no longer stop. What I needed now wasn't an argument, not logic, but action. A strong, unwavering act to show my son and that daughter-in-law of mine that this house still belongs to me, no matter how hard they try to deny it. That night, when all the lights on the street had gone dark, I called a locksmith. In the dim room, I listened to the drill, metal hitting metal, echoing in steady beats. I stood beside the dining table, where Thomas once laid our family meals, my hands trembling, but my resolve steady. I watched every move of the locksmith, every new lock installed, and I smiled, not out of joy, but because the return of power was getting closer. The house was quieter than ever. No more footsteps from Daniel every morning. No more music from Lauren's room. I stood at the door, looking at the new locks gleaming under the hallway light. Each key sat neatly in my palm like an untriggered bullet, ready to warn anyone who dared to invade. In my heart, I felt a strange satisfaction, the stillness of reclaimed authority. The next morning they came home. I heard the first knock, light but firm. I didn't answer. The second knock came, longer, more urgent. Lauren shouted, her voice trembling, "Mom, open the door! Daniel is—" But Daniel, my son, just stood beside her, confused, saying nothing. For the first time in weeks, my son didn't defend his wife. He stayed silent. They knocked, pleaded, cried, even threatened me, but I stood behind the window watching them with a cold expression. Not a single word left my mouth, only silence. Silence stronger than anything I could say. Silence as a warning. This house is not yours to claim, and I will not step aside. Lauren tugged Daniel toward the door, still whining. "Mom, we just wanted a little fun." "You don't have to be so harsh." But Daniel said nothing. His head lowered, his eyes empty. For the first time, I realized he was beginning to see the truth through my eyes, that his mother, the woman who built this home with her entire life, would not be cast aside so easily. That night, when they finally left, I stood alone in the middle of the room, hand resting on the wooden table where warm family dinners once lived. Inside me rose a wave, anger and pride intertwined. I had reclaimed what they thought they owned. I had locked the door, but it wasn't just a physical lock. I had sealed the power, the soul, the memory of the house. In the darkness, I remembered Thomas. I saw him smiling, gentle and warm. "Helen, you finally understand," he whispered through the air. I closed my eyes, inhaling the scent of old wood and damp earth from the garden that once was, and I promised myself, they will learn to respect what was built with heart. I walked down the hallway, glancing through each window. I knew these locks weren't just keeping them out. They were reminders that real strength doesn't come from dominance or words, but from someone who can stand firm through her own pain and fury. And that night, I smiled in the dark. No sound, no explanation, just the return of the mother, the true owner of the house, the woman who has endured enough and is now quietly preparing for the next step in her plan to take everything back. The house remained silent, but I knew every brick, every beam, every door was listening. They were waiting for me to write the next chapter of my story. After the night I changed the locks and refused to open the door for Daniel and Lauren, the house sank into an unusual stillness, as if even the walls were holding their breath, waiting to witness my next move. Outside, the knocking had stopped, but inside, in every breath, in every step across the wooden floor, I felt something shift. I was no longer the gentle mother who always gave way to her son and his ambitious wife. I had disappeared into the darkness of silence, and at the same time, I returned with all of my power. News of my bold act spread through town. They called me the crazy woman, a label that once would have terrified me, embarrassed me, made me want to explain, apologize, make peace. But now, I simply smiled. Each time I heard whispers, saw curious or judgmental glances, I felt something fierce and joyful rise within me, because they never understood. Nothing is more crazy than the determination of a mother who has lost everything, yet still stands tall. I remembered the lavender garden they uprooted to make room for a pool. I remembered Daniel's eyes when he shouted, "This is her house. Don't you get it?" Back then, I thought I would collapse. I thought I had lost my son, lost my home, lost everything. But now, every painful moment had turned into fuel for my return. I proved one truth. No one can take away my right to be respected unless I allow it. The house grew quieter than ever. No more blaring music, no more fake laughter. Just me, standing in the living room, fingers tracing the old wooden panels, inhaling the scent of wood, of memories, of Thomas. I knew that no matter how they tried, Daniel and Lauren could never erase what was built with heart, with pain, with real love. Every brick, every wall, every empty corner still listened and still knew who I was. The town gossiped, but I didn't care. They saw me walk by, shoulders straight, steps slow but steady, like a general in her own story. They called me crazy and mocked me, but I knew they never understood. This silence was my loudest roar, my way of holding power, of reclaiming what they thought I had lost. I sat by the window, watching rooftops shimmer in the morning light. Not a single word left my lips, but inside my chest, I heard each heartbeat. The heartbeat of a mother who had learned to rise again. The heartbeat of retribution without threats. The heartbeat of someone who knows silence can be stronger than any speech. I looked out at the backyard, imagining lavender rising again, and I understood that my silence was the clearest warning to anyone who thought they could cross my boundaries again. They thought I was afraid. They thought I was weak. But in truth, I was standing in the center of power, calm and resolute, preparing for the next step, one that would show Daniel and Lauren that this house is not just a home, but a symbol of authority, memory, and the respect that cannot be bought. And when night fell, I still sat there, silent, smiling. This silence, to the curious, was madness, but to me, it was victory. A quiet victory, without noise or proof, but enough for me to know that this time I had reclaimed everything, at least the part that mattered most. I am the true owner of the house and the keeper of its soul. After long weeks of silence, weeks in which the laughter and footsteps of Daniel and Lauren slowly faded from memory, the house seemed to awaken to its own rhythm. No more loud music, no more careless footsteps intruding into every corner of my memories. Just me, the walls, the past, and the lavender seeds quietly preparing to sprout. That silence, which looked like the end of a battle, was in fact only preparation for the next step, the confrontation I knew would come. On a cold, windy afternoon, when late-season sunlight slanted through the window, I heard a car crawling into the yard. I stood behind the window frame, breathing softly. Daniel stepped out, thinner than before, face hollowed, eyes filled with regret and an unfamiliar kind of worry. He walked up to the door, pausing at the hallway, his voice trembling. "Mom, I'm sorry, but please understand Lauren." Those words dropped like a stone, but this time they didn't crush me. I was used to shocks, to careless words, to anger and disrespect. I looked at my son, the man who had once been the child I carried, the boy I protected and taught with all my strength. Now he stood before me apologizing, yet even in that apology, Lauren still lingered in his tone, in that need to justify her. I answered softly, voice calm but solid as steel. "No, my son. I don't need you to understand me. I only need you to respect me, the way I respected your father." In my eyes, Daniel saw my entire life, a life that built this house with sweat and tears, that loved, sacrificed, and remained patient with him through every breath. I didn't need him to understand every pain I endured. I didn't need him to defend or explain anything. I only needed respect. A simple thing he had forgotten long ago. The air grew thick. Daniel was silent, eyes cast down, realizing each word I spoke formed a boundary he must not cross.
Lauren stood behind him, trying to smile, but her smile now looked faint, washed out by the quiet strength radiating from me. For the first time, I saw my firmness as a mother make my son step back, and that alone was enough to crack the power they believed they had. I turned away, walked toward the living room, hand resting on the wooden chair where Thomas once sat reading, breathing in the scent of old wood, of memories, of love, and pain. I knew Daniel was watching me, and in that moment, I felt something undeniable. My son no longer dared to dismiss me. He began to understand that this house, these memories, and I, none of it could ever be replaced. A gust of wind brushed through the window, making the old curtain tremble like whispers from the past. The days Thomas and I laid each brick, planted each lavender stalk, taught our son with love but also with discipline. I smiled faintly, but inside me, the satisfaction was deeper than anything before.
Not because Daniel apologized, but because I finally made him see the limits he could not cross. That evening, as the light faded, Daniel left. His eyes no longer carried confidence or excuses. I stood by the window watching his figure fade down the narrow road, my heart filled with peace and a rising anticipation. I knew the battle wasn't over. Lauren would come back with new tactics. Daniel would return with new arguments. But now, I was ready. I had learned not only to be silent, but to make silence a weapon. I walked back to my room, lifted the wooden tray holding the soaked lavender seeds, looked at the tiny grains, and whispered, "They will learn to respect, and these seeds will remind them that this mother never surrenders." In the stillness of night, I felt my return was not just about power. It was the silent verdict for anyone who thought they could walk over my heart and my home.
My son's plea was only the beginning, and I knew the days ahead would bring more chapters they would have to pay for. But this time, I would be the one holding the pen. After Daniel's trembling plea, the quiet night seemed to lift a weight from my shoulders. I stood by the window, watching the shadows of trees sway in the wind, knowing that my silence had forced my son to step back, to recognize the boundaries of respect. But life never allows us to rest. Just a moment of peace, a single breath of steadfastness, and everything can collapse. And just as expected, the storm was coming, not only across the sky, but into my very heart. That evening, cold winds began to scream through the cracks in the doors, carrying the first hailstones of the season, which soon turned into heavy snow swirling across the roads and the yard. My phone rang, a trembling voice reporting news that froze me in place. Daniel had an accident trying to return to the old house. His car skidded on the icy road, flipped multiple times before coming to rest in a frozen, snow-covered lot, battered by the raging storm. My heart felt crushed.
There was no longer anger or power, only fear and overwhelming regret. I ran into the night, my feet slipping on the thick snow, hair wet and plastered to my face, streetlights flickering with every ragged breath. The wind screamed past my ears, carrying the storm's roar as if testing human will. But I didn't stop. I knew I had to find him, save him, even if it meant plunging into the fiercest storm of my life. Along the way, each bending tree seemed like a shadow from the past, reminding me of the years lost. Thomas, the days building the house, memories of Daniel as a boy running across the yard, all mingling with the present, making my heart ache and tighten. Inside me, a storm raged stronger than any outside, a storm of anger, fear, love, and regret fused into one. When I arrived at the scene, the sight took my breath away. Daniel's car lay tilted, covered in snow, his body unmoving, trembling from the cold. I ran to him, brushing off the snow, holding him tight, my voice shaking. "Daniel, I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you." Daniel opened his eyes, looking at me with pain and remorse, as if he finally understood the full weight of his actions, words, and carelessness leading to this moment. I held his hand tightly, saying nothing, letting love and fear fill the embrace, erasing every distance between mother and son. The blizzard raged, but within me, a new resolve formed. A mother's power is not only to protect her home, but to protect her family to the end, even when they have hurt her. I knew that when Daniel recovered, nothing would be the same, but this time, I was ready to face it, not only with authority, but with the love and pain only a mother could understand. Amid the storm, my eyes wet, heart pounding, I smiled faintly. This was a moment of reckoning for mistakes, but also a turning point for healing, for teaching my son respect, and for asserting that this mother, though fearful, would never bow to any storm, neither the storms outside nor the ones within the human heart. And as I guided Daniel home through the white roads, I knew this storm was only the first turning point, a reminder that power, love, and revenge can blend together, forming the unpredictable strength of a mother. The house, its walls, and my heart, all were ready for the next chapters of this never-ending story. After the terrifying blizzard the night before, as Daniel had just recovered from the accident, the house became eerily quiet. Everything seemed to breathe again, as if every wall, every old plank had witnessed and inhaled my fear and anguish from that night. I sat in the living room, hands still wet from the snow, heart pounding, exhausted, yet overflowing with emotion, worry, anger, and a vague joy that Daniel was alive.
As Daniel took off his coat to warm himself, I noticed a piece of paper peeking out from his inner pocket. My hands trembled as I lifted the letter, heart halting for a moment. The scrawled words, raw yet sincere, sent shivers down my spine. I'm sorry, Mom. Lauren will never understand the value of this house. But I do. I stood there in silence, eyes blurred with tears. Just one unsent letter, a few words, but it carried all the regret and awakening of my son. Weeks of arguments, days of anger, nights of silence, all converged in those fragile lines.
And I understood. Daniel had finally seen the truth. Lauren would never understand. And I, the mother who had built this house, who had held this family together with my whole heart, was the true heart of this home. I folded the letter, the weight in my chest feeling like I had regained a piece of power I thought was lost. Daniel stepped forward, eyes still wary, still uncertain, but now with a hint of awareness. I said nothing, only offered a gentle smile, the smile of someone who had triumphed through steadfastness, through love, and through her silence. Memories flooded back. The days spent with Thomas laying the first bricks, planting lavender, afternoons teaching Daniel lessons of patience and respect. I never imagined that one day my son would have to write such a letter, to finally realize the value he had overlooked. The letter was not just an apology. It was a sign of awakening. It was like a gentle wind blowing through the house, carrying the warmth of recognition, soothing accumulated wounds. I felt a strange power. Forgiveness was no longer a necessity, but a privilege I held. I had shown my son boundaries, shown him consequences, and now, with just a few lines, Daniel had acknowledged it, something his words had never done before. I placed the letter on the table, gazing out the window at the lavender garden, uprooted but slowly reviving in my memory. The storm had passed, but within me another storm, gentle, profound, continued to pulse. It reminded me that true power does not always lie in fury or direct revenge, but sometimes in the ability to stand firm, to face another's regret, and let them recognize the value of what they had taken for granted. Daniel stood in silence, eyes glistening, and I knew that from now on, every choice, every step he took would be different. Lauren, no matter what she tried, could no longer deny the power I held. The power of a mother who had lost, who had raged, who had remained silent and had made her son see the truth. I lifted the letter, inhaled deeply, and whispered to myself, "Finally, you understand. But I no longer need you to understand me. I only need you to know who the true heart of this house is." Outside, the lavender branches, seemingly dead through winter, now swayed with the wind, reminding me that everything, no matter how battered by storms, could be reborn. And this rebirth, of Daniel, of the house, of motherly love, would open the next chapter in the battle for respect, power, and the undying force of love. After Daniel's unsent letter was found and read, a sense of relief washed over me. Yet I knew that the days ahead would not be filled with silent remorse alone. Lauren, the woman who had entered my son's life like a violent wave, would never miss a chance to blame or threaten. The storm outside had passed, but another, smoldering, ruthless and cruel, was quietly brewing inside the hospital room. I drew a deep breath, trying to stay calm, yet every heartbeat reminded me that this battle for power was far from over. Lauren appeared in the hospital corridor, her steps a mix of anger and panic, like a cornered cat. Her eyes burned with resentment, lips trembling as she approached. She shouted, her voice sharp and dripping with sarcasm. "You stressed him so much, he almost died." Her words did not shake me.
In fact, a small part of me wanted to smile. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Lauren revealing her true face, regret laced with blame. I stood tall, my voice calm yet still strong, each word striking as if to touch her very soul. I did not bring him down. I only let him see what he had done. In that moment, Lauren's gaze seemed to pierce me, yet she realized that my words were not meant to argue, but to deliver a silent verdict, striking harder than any accusation she could hurl. I did not need to explain to defend myself. I simply stood there, eyes unwavering, letting my silence make her face the truth of herself, the woman who had stepped into my family, shaken everything, and now had to confront the awakening of a mother and son. Memories surged within me, every brick laid with Thomas, every afternoon teaching Daniel the value of family, of respect, of responsibility and love. No matter what Lauren tried, she could never replace those memories, never claim the power I had built with my heart.
And now I realized, true strength does not come from shouting matches or arguments, but from making the other person see their own faults and confront the truth. Lauren still stood there, voice trembling, eyes wavering, yet she dared not argue. I stepped closer, looking straight into her eyes, my heart both firm and calm. Finally, she had to see her limits, to understand that this house, this family, and I, the mother who had endured, lost, and persevered, would never be subdued. I turned, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder as he sat dazed on the hospital bed. He looked at me with a mix of fear and gratitude. I needed to say nothing more. My words, my gaze, the silence that had passed, all had conveyed a single message. Respect is non-negotiable, and true power belongs to those who can stand firm amidst the storm. As Lauren walked away, pale-faced, I exhaled softly. One chapter had ended, yet I knew the battle for power, understanding, and silent retribution was far from over. The house, its walls, and its memories all bore witness to one truth. A mother could make her family, and even those who thought themselves powerful face reality through their own fear and awakening. I returned to the room, looking out at the garden where lavender branches swayed gently after the storm, morning sunlight cutting diagonally through the snow. In that quiet moment, I understood. My silence had become the loudest roar, powerful enough to force everyone to recognize the true value of the house, the family, and of myself, a mother who would never be defeated. After the tense confrontation at the hospital, with Lauren leaving in silence and Daniel beginning to see things differently, the house became quieter than ever. I stepped into the backyard, where the snow had melted and the lavender garden, long dormant through the winter, now revealed only broken branches and wet soil. The gentle morning air carried the earthy scent of soil and grass, reminding me of the days when Thomas was still here, when Daniel was a boy running and laughing among the flower beds. Everything seemed to have passed the storm, both outside and within each heart, yet I knew the true revival had not yet fully arrived, and this spring would come not just to the land, but to my son's heart as well. Daniel entered the yard, tired but with eyes shining with a new determination. He was no longer with Lauren, no longer entangled in distractions that clouded reality. Only my son remained, the one who had stumbled, who had once betrayed the memories and love of our family, now returning with sincerity. Seeing me kneel, hands dirtied, tending to each lavender sprout reviving from the soil, he let out a soft sigh, his voice low but meaningful. "Mother, I want to start over." I stood there, looking at him, feeling a strange yet familiar sensation. His words were more than an apology. They were a declaration. Daniel had awakened, recognized his mistakes, and was ready to take responsibility for his actions. But I did not respond immediately, only remained silent. My silence was not anger or indifference, but a way for him to feel the weight of what had occurred, to understand that a mother's trust and power
one who had safeguarded the family through pain, resolve, and calculated silent retribution, cannot be so easily exchanged. I knelt down, quietly planting each lavender branch into the soil, feeling the soft, damp earth beneath my hands. In that moment, I saw Daniel slowly kneel beside me, helping tend the young plants. No words were spoken, yet between us, a silent message resonated. Maternal love is not just about forgiveness, but also about holding power. A test for a son to recognize the value of family and true love. The days gone by had left deep marks. The quarrels, the blizzards, the confrontations with Lauren, and the long nights of silence. But now, watching Daniel focus beside me, I realized that all the suffering, all the silence, all the fury had not been in vain. They had created a different Daniel, one who could reflect, respect, and be ready to start anew. Outside, sunlight filtered through the trees, softly illuminating the reviving lavender. I lifted my head, a gentle smile appearing on my lips, the smile of someone who had weathered storms, witnessed collapse and recovery, and now saw spring returning both to the garden and to her family. The scent of earth, the fragrance of flowers, the morning light, in my hands, dirtied yet full of life, all blended into a feeling of tranquility and strength, as if to say that power, love, and careful retribution can all culminate in revival and forgiveness. I placed my hand on Daniel's shoulder, looking deeply into his eyes. In this moment, I understood that every challenge we had faced was not only a lesson for my son, but also a testament to a mother's strength. A mother, even after enduring pain, loss, and life's storms, can still hold power, awaken awareness, and sow new springtime for her family. And as we planted each lavender branch together, tending the soil and flowers, I knew a new chapter was beginning, where love, power, and my son's return would intertwine with the earth, the blossoms, and the everlasting spring within a mother's heart. After long days facing Lauren, watching my son stumble and then rise again, thanks to the lessons of my silence and quiet strength, I realized that true power does not lie in clinging to the past or keeping Daniel by my side forever. The house, every brick, every lavender sprout, where Thomas and I had poured our youth, sweat, and love, had now witnessed too much pain, too many arguments, and even cracks in my son's heart. I stood in the living room, hand touching the old wall, taking a deep breath, and understood that for Daniel to truly grow, to learn to stand on his own, I had to make a difficult yet powerful decision. Sell the house, but not to Daniel. This decision did not come from selfishness or spite, but from the clarity and foresight of a mother who had weathered storms. I wanted him to build his own life, to create his own home, just as I had with Thomas. A home is not just a roof and brick walls. It is lessons, effort, and the sweat to preserve it. If I gave this house to Daniel easily, he would never feel the value of effort and responsibility. I wanted him to experience it, to learn and to mature on his own. In the following weeks, I met a young couple, their eyes shining with happiness and the desire to build a home. I told them the story of the house, of the love and memories that had shaped it. They listened, moved and respectful, unlike the careless or judgmental eyes of Lauren. When the contract was signed, I felt a mixture of relief and weight. I had let go of the past, but at the same time, I had preserved power and memory, lessons that Daniel needed to truly grow. But I did not stop there. I purchased a small cabin by the lake, a place with no noise, no judging eyes, only clear water, wind, and birdsong. This would be where I spent my remaining days, where I could look back on my life, my family, and the lessons I had taught Daniel.
Every morning, as the sun reflected off the lake, I felt freedom, control, and the power of a mother who had chosen wisely for her child to mature. Daniel visited the cabin for the first time, his eyes wide, no longer confused or expecting me to hand him everything. I saw a truly grown Daniel for the first time, not dependent, not resentful,
only respectful and deeply understanding the value of family, maternal love, and what it takes to protect and build a home. I smiled, and in that smile was forgiveness, power, and the lesson of quiet retribution. Sometimes, the best way to love is to let someone learn to take responsibility for their own life. Each day at the cabin, I remembered the old house, the lavender branches, Daniel's stumbles and self-recovery. But now, everything was in order. The past had been sent to the right hands. The lesson had arrived at the right moment. And I, a mother who had weathered storms, losses, and quiet battles, now held the power, love, and peace I deserved. Looking at the lake reflecting the sky, I whispered to myself, sometimes a mother must make a difficult choice for her child to truly grow. I had done so, and I knew that spring, both in the old garden and in the family, in my heart, would return, strong and vibrant, just like me, a mother who has never bowed before life's storms. Many years had passed since I left the old house, the one that had witnessed joys, sorrows, and countless silent battles between mother and son, between memory and reality. Life by the lake moved slowly, peacefully, yet in my heart, I still carried every breath of the past, every laugh of young Daniel, every wide-eyed look he had the first time he stepped into the house his parents had built with youth and love. I had lived to see Daniel grow, to walk on his own, learning to cherish and love, but like any mother, I knew that the memories and lessons sown into him would not fade for a long time. When I left behind more than belongings. I left values, lessons, and the quiet presence of a mother who had endured, remained steadfast and strong. Many years later, Daniel and his daughter Rachel returned to the old house. Stepping through the wooden gate, they inhaled the familiar, time-worn scent. The house still stood, silent, yet carrying a long history of love, pain, and unspoken lessons. Every wall, every brick, every lavender branch seemed to remember everything that had happened, as if the house was not only a shelter, but also a witness to what it once filled a mother's heart. Daniel opened the cupboard, hands trembling, and found my journal. The place where I had recorded my deepest thoughts and messages I hoped he would understand when he matured. He turned each page, his eyes tracing the familiar handwriting, and my voice seemed to echo in his heart. If one day you read this, remember, home is not where you were born, but where you learn to love rightly. Daniel froze, tears welling in his eyes, blending sorrow. Rachel stood beside him, wide-eyed, sensing the depth in every word, as if the next generation was learning about love, steadfastness, and the true value of family. Outside, the lavender garden bloomed in full, purple and fragrant. The scent was not just a memory, but a testament to all I had sown, enduring love, silent lessons, and the unshakable strength of a mother. Daniel stood in the midst of the garden, holding the journal, looking around the house with eyes full of both sorrow and respect. He felt the weight of the past, yet also the freedom his mother had left, allowing him and Rachel to walk their own path. I had gone, but the house remembered the hands that once nurtured it, and when Rachel ran to pluck a lavender branch, letting its fragrance fill the air, and Daniel lifted each old brick in the yard, touching the walls, I knew that all the lessons, all the love, and the quiet power of a mother had been passed on, not through words, but through memory, through the house, and through the hearts of her children. The house, silent and steadfast, still remembered everything. It remembered me, maternal love, the lessons I had sown, and an undying spring where love never fades and family memories live on forever.